So what I'm going to be talking through is beat structure, which is a way of structuring stories, and that can be novels, it can be fics, and in particular, it can be scripts. If you're writing a script, this is the structure that 99% of scripts will use. It's called, well, it's been around for a while, but it became very popular in the early 2000s because a gentleman called Blake Schneider, who was an American screenwriter, sort of wrote it all out in a book, and it was the first time IDB explained it properly. And he called it Save the Cat for reasons that I'm not going to go into. But because we're using The Wire as an example, this is now going to be Save the Murderous Spy Lizard, because that's what we're going to do instead. So, okay, cool. So, in the same way that every human life has certain beats and points that it hits, so every person is born, they have a childhood, they have a teenage adolescence, they go out in the world, sometimes they get a job, sometimes they don't, but that's a common one. Sometimes they fall in love, they get married, sometimes they have children, they grow old, they die. In the same way that every human life has that sort of points that it hits, every story has that too. It's a journey. Every story has a journey that most Western stories will follow this journey and will hit beats. So in the same way that every human life has a beat, which is birth and death, a story has beats that it hits like that. 95% of scripts particularly that go wrong, it's because the structure is screwed up. If you get the structure right, it's very hard to write a bad script. Now, it might not be a good one, but it won't be bad because human beings are sort of programmed to follow this story structure. So as long as you follow it, the audience will feel satisfied. So if you've ever watched something and you think, well, that didn't lead anywhere, or why was that bit of information included and didn't, follow it, or, I feel like there was only half a story there, it's because the structure is wrong. Even if the dialogue is brilliant, the structure isn't there. So you have to get this right first because it's the skeleton of a story. It's very well known in scripts for different reasons, particularly episodic TV, but basically it applies to all stories. All novels will also follow the structure. They just stretch it out. Yeah, okay, so you might have seen before, like this little diagram here. Sorry, I don't know if you can see it because I'm in the way. This is how a story peaks. That's the movement within a script, within a story, which we'll come back into later. Don't worry about it too much for now, but that's what we're going to do. Okay, so every story has beats, which is what we're going to look at. TV in particular is divided up into usually 4 acts, but not necessarily, and a teaser and a tag. So you start off with a teaser, you then have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and then you have a tag. Episodic TV, particularly Star Trek and particularly Deep Space Nine, follows this to the letter. The reason why it does that is because you have a lot of writers writing the episodes and because they have to hit timings for ad breaks. So this is extremely used in Deep Space Nine. If you sit through an episode, or particularly if you read the scripts that you can get online, which are the shooting scripts, you will literally be able to see what these are. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go through what the beats are and then give the example of how they are in The Wire. At the end, I've also got a help sheet. So this is from a document I put together about a year and a half ago for the Deep Space Nine community, explaining how beats work using Deep Space Nine episodes. So they're not a lot of beats, they're about 12 beats, but at the end, I will give you a sheet which says that if you want it. So the opening image, so the first part that you have is called the teaser, and usually, in fact always in Deep Space Nine, it's the bit before the opening credits. So it's a small act or scene before the actual story starts. So the story of The Wire is Garak is sick and Bashir is trying to figure out what's wrong with him. That is the main plot of The Wire. But in the teaser, that hasn't started yet. So within the teaser, you have 4 beats. You have opening image, you have setup, you have message and theme, and you have catalyst. Opening image is a visual that represents the struggle and tone of the story before it begins. So in The Wire, what we have is Garak and Bashir walking down the promenade together, and they are friends. But if you actually look at the script, and this is the extra here, can you see my mouse, people? Can you see? Oh, maybe not. Hello?
Yep, we can see the mouse.
Yeah, cool. You're muted, sorry. So this is an extract from the script, and you can literally see the writer's written teaser at the top, because this is the structure that they're using. So Garak and Bashir are walking down the promenade, but the Bajorans behind him react with muted hostility. You can't see that on screen particularly, but it's in the script, because the opening image is they're friends, but there's something in the background, in Garak's background, in the Cardassian background, that's going to come into play here. So that's the opening image. Okay, the next beat is the setup. So that expands upon the main image. So basically, they talk about their novels, their different cultures, and it looks at their friendship and how that is at this particular point before the story starts. So their friendship is fairly low level. It extends to them having lunch together and swapping stories. And Bashir is trying to understand Cardassian novels, and by extension Garak. So it's just setting up the scene. It's conveying information that happened before. And then within that, you then get the theme of what the message is about. And Garak says, even though Bashir is trying to understand, he says it's a waste of time because he's from the Federation and he can't understand it. So that starts to introduce the message of the episode, which is understanding and friendship. Now, this is all laying the groundwork for the start of the story. Something also interesting which the writer starts to do here, which we'll come back to later, is he starts to use the word friend a lot. So the theme is about friends in some way. The two of them are friends, and they have an exchange of dialogue where they're talking about entertaining one of Bashir's lady friends, and friend has got a double meaning there. It's friend, but also it's a lover. So the writer started to put that in too, so leading the audience in a particular way. Okay, then we have catalyst. So this is the point that starts the story. So basically it launches the main character, which in this case is Bashir, into the main story. And the main story here is Garak is in pain, he's sick, and he's going to need to figure out why. Usually in Star Trek, in fact, nearly always in Star Trek, this is the bit where just before the title credits, it's like the thing that launches you into the story. So this is the ship exploding, or the alien arriving, or in this case, Garak's in pain and Bashir wants to figure it out. So Garak pushes Bashir away and tells him, "Stop! Don't bother him." And that's basically what Garak is going to do for the rest of the story. Like it starts the story off here. So that is all the teaser. Every single story on TV and most DS9 episodes that work will have that structure as a teaser. It will hit those beats. Now, there's a lot of variation in what those beats might look like. And if you're writing a much more softer story, those beats don't have to be so dramatic. It can be, the alien arriving, blowing up the world as the catalyst, but it can just be like, someone can't find a teddy bear. And then if that's going to be the catalyst for the story. But that is the beginning. Okay, any questions at this point? No, cool, I will carry on. Okay, so then after that, we go into Act 1. Every single story in Act 1 is what's going on, what we're going to do about it. So the main character grapples with what's just happened in the catalyst, what am I going to do? So in this case, Bashir was like, what's going on? Garak's sick, I don't know why is he sick? What am I going to do about it? So he runs about talking to lots of different people about his concerns, what's going on with Garak, what am I going to do with it, trying to figure out what's going on. So he talks to Jadzia, he talks to Quark, he tries to get access to the Cardassian medical records to figure out what's going on. If I think of another DS9 example, so in the Pale Moonlight, for example, the catalyst is Sisko deciding that too many people have died with his casualty list and wanting to bring the Romulans into the war. Act 1 is, okay, how am I going to bring the Romulans into the war? What am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about the fact that all these people are dying? So Act 1 is usually, once you have your catalyst, Act 1 is usually very easy to write because it's just someone trying to figure out what's going on and get to the bottom of everything. Okay, start with the B story. Now, this is the interesting thing about this script. The B story is usually the love story. Now, it doesn't have to be, but usually it is. And in this script, the B story is Garak and Bashir's relationship, which can be taken various ways. But it starts here, where Dax and Bashir are talking, and they are talking about whether or not Bashir and Garak are friends or not. The B story always starts in Act 1, and it always has something to do with the theme of the episode. And what ideally you want to do, if your script is good or your story is good, is the B story needs to come back at the end and basically provide the solution to the character for the main plot. So the main plot here is Garak is sick and Bashir is trying to understand why he's sick and trying to help him. It's a medical plot, but the B story is the relationship, is the friendship, which, again, the word friend, as we'll see when we go through the script, is used in different meanings throughout. Sometimes it means lover, sometimes it means other things. So it's looking at that. Okay? And then this is the last part of Act 1, which is always a little choice the main character makes to push them into the world of Act 2 and locks them into the rest of the story. Now, you can see here, just to prove I'm not talking crap, literally the script writer has put end of Act 1, where in this case, Bashir's choice is Garak's collapsed, I'm going to transfer him to Ops and he's going to become my patient for real. Like I'm going to transfer him to the infirmary and he's going to become my patient for real. So that's quite a small little choice. Often it's just the character being carried along by the story, but it catapults you into Act 2, which is the main premise of your idea or your episode. And in this one, the kind of pitchy idea for this episode is probably Garak is Bashir's patient and is lying to him about what's wrong with him. I think that's probably the pitchy idea for the episode. That's always Act 2. That's always the most, the chunky idea of the episode. At the end of Act 1, Bashir, or the main character, they always make a choice that puts them into Act 2. Yeah, so this here is an extract from the script, so you can literally see end of Act 1 when we made the choice. Act 2, this is what's starting. Okay, Act 2, again, in basically every story ever written, Act 2 is always, let's explore what's cool about this idea, let's find some clues. So it's basically like detective work. Act 2 is usually the hardest to write, or the one that people screw up the most. So Act 2 will be Garak is the doctor's patient now. Bashir still doesn't know what's going on, but he's going to start looking for clues. He finds out about the Obsidian Order. He finds about the implant, and he starts to make progress on finding the solution to the main plot. So he's now got some background information that's going to help him solve the reason why Garak is sick. Which leads us to the midpoint. Now, the midpoint is literally the middle of the script. Is the point where the main character gets everything they've wanted from the beginning, or they think they've wanted from the beginning. So Bashir from the beginning has wanted to find out what's wrong with Garak and for Garak to trust him. And this scene where Bashir goes to Garak's quarters and like Garak starts to tell him a story about what happened, why he got exiled, why the implants in his head. Bashir gets what he wanted from the beginning. He gets trust, and he gets a reason why Garak is sick, so he can start making progress on it. The midpoint is usually quite an important part of the script, and it's difficult to get right. And usually it will have one of the main images from the episode in it. So this here is one of the main episodes of the episode. It's the reflection, it's the mirroring, but it's kind of a peak in the drama, but it's not the final peak, which I'll just go on to explain a bit more. So as the Act 2 continues, it then becomes the bad guys close in. Again, the bad guys close in is the name for the beat in every script and every story that this kind of transition follows. So the baddies basically close in at the end of Act 2 and sort of hinder the main character's progress. So Bashir's main progress is, figuring out what's wrong with Garak, which he's kind of done now medically, and trying to get him better. It's a medical plot. But now Odo here is coming in wanting to ask Garak questions where he needs to rest. Odo's talking about the Obsidian Order and what Garak did in the past. So Bashir kind of pushes that away. Usually at the end of Act 2, everything is slightly resolved. So Bashir manages to push the past away, the consequences of Garak's past away at the end of Act 2. But then, let me do Act 3. Okay. Act 3, which is the next stage that every story goes into, is all is lost. So things get as bad as they could possibly get for the person in the main plot. And it has to be a mirror of the midpoint. So just to explain what that is in this instance, it's the scene in The Wire when Garak wakes up and is crying and in pain and suffering, and suddenly Bashir realizes at the midpoint, where he thought he had all the answers and he thought that Garak was trusting him, he can't trust anymore, because Garak says basically, I lied to you, I wasn't telling the truth before. Also, Bashir still can't cure him at this point. And then Garak tells Bashir, we aren't friends, like, I hate you, which is going against everything that Bashir's kind of wanted from the beginning. He wants trust, he wants to be his friend, he wants to help. So this is as bad as it gets for the main part, and then gets even worse because then Garak collapses. And so Bashir realizes that switching off the implant, the plan he had before, isn't going to work, and he needs something else. He needs more information about Cardassian culture before he's going to be able to help save Garak. So within that Act 2, as well, Act 3, you have the long dark night of the soul, which is a bittersweet moment during everything being crap. So we're back to where we were at the beginning. Basically, Bashir has made no progress because Garak is still sick, he still can't save him, and he still doesn't actually know anything about Garak. He doesn't know what's going on, he doesn't know the difference between the truth and the lie. And Bashir is just about giving up on getting the truth. So what you have there is the end of Act 3, basically him saying, I may as well give up because you're not telling me the truth. But in this case, it's quite a bittersweet moment, but it's the end of Act 3. It's like literally all is lost. This couldn't get any worse. Let me click on. Oops. And then you get Act 4. So Act 4 is a choice to try again. Garak tells Bashir not to give up. He says, don't give up on me. You have to keep going. And Garak makes a choice to try again in terms of trying to find out more about Garak and giving him forgiveness, even though he doesn't completely understand. And then Bashir is then going to make the choice to fly into Cardassian space and to find out what's wrong with Garak and save him. Now, the reason that he does this is why it's Act 4 and it's going to be the finale, is because now you've got the main medical plot of what's wrong with Garak, aligning with Bashir's plot of understanding and friendship, the B plot. So he's going to go do that. He's going to go fly into Cardassian space because Garak is his friend. So you get the interweaving of the main plot and the B plot, and that's what happens. Also here, again, we get a idea that maybe the word friend doesn't mean friend, because this pause here where it says Elim wasn't my aide, he was my friend. Like, it's debatable as to what friend means. Now, eventually, we're going to find out at the end of the episode that friend doesn't mean friend. It means, in this case, Garak himself, because that's who Elim is. But friend can also be read as lover there, or another relation. So it started to, again, introduce the idea that friend doesn't always mean the same thing, and there might be different interpretations of that. So then we get Act 4, which is the finale. And as I said before, this incorporates like the theme, it incorporates the B story, so it incorporates things like friendship, understanding, the fact that Bashir and Garak are friends, to work out the A story, to work out the main medical plot. So Bashir goes to see Tain and finds out what's going on, and he gives Bashir enough information to save Garak. And he also gets more information about his friend that he wants, because Tain tells Garak his real name. It's at this point, Bashir and Garak are now more deep friends than they were at the beginning. So at the beginning, they were just friends who had lunch together and swapped stories. This is much more an in-depth friendship now. So he understands much more about Garak. He's seen Garak in pain. He's helped him out. He's taken a massive risk and gone into Cardassian space to help him. And then here we get another thing where Tain says, "I thought you were his friend." And in the script, it says, "Bashir can't deny it anymore." This is when a script says "Abi," it's basically, that's a very important moment for the actor. They need to be listening to that. They need to do something to show that that's a change, a shift for the character. So Bashir is now completely accepting that Garak is his friend, even if Garak is a genocidal whatever. He is now accepting that, and it literally says Bashir can't deny it anymore. So that's a change that you've had since the beginning. What Bashir can't deny might be that Garak is a very good friend, and might actually be something else, maybe a bit more romantic than the script implies, which you do get through things that the writer adds in about what is friend here. They do, like, what does friend actually mean, because it has been used earlier on to mean lover, and it has been used earlier on to mean like a version of myself. So yeah, that's the finale. So that's the end of Act 4. I appreciate I've gone quite quickly, but every story has teaser with those beats, Act 1 with those beats, Act 2 with these beats, Act 3 with these beats, Act 4 with these beats, and then it has a tag which has the closing image beat in, which is a mirror image of the opening image that reflects the change that the story has brought about. So in The Wire, what the closing image is Bashir is sat having lunch. He's lonely. Garak now arrives and gives him another Cardassian novel, which at the beginning he said there was no point doing because Bashir would never be able to understand it because he's too in Federation dogma. So Garak has changed in a way, because now he's saying, okay, I'm going to give Bashir another book because I now think he will be able to understand me. And Bashir has changed in a way because, yes, they're having lunch, but it's a much more in-depth relationship than it was at the beginning. So what that does to an audience is it takes away all the anxiety. So you had a normal world beforehand in the teaser, which was all, you know, we're having lunch, we're friends, this is great. Then something went wrong to disrupt that world, and the audience like, oh shit, what's going on? And the whole story is resolving that, oh shit, what's going on tension, and then the closing image takes away that tension. So it's basically saying this is the new world now, which is, you know, Bashir and Garrett are still friends, they're still having lunch. It might be a little bit more in depth, but Bashir is okay with being friends with Garrett, even though he doesn't understand anything. And in the script, you can literally see it says, as Garrett and Bashir return to business as usual. It's literally putting back the normality that was in there at the beginning for the viewer, for the audience, but it's got a slightly different angle because now they're a bit more friends. When it says end of Act 5 here, that's basically Act 5 is sometimes what the tag's called. So you've got, you know, Act 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes the tag is called Act 5. Yeah, okay, so that is basically the structure of every story. Most writers, particularly of fic, follow it to some degree. They just don't know that they are, because it's so common in everything that you see that it's just sort of in there as osmosis. But if you know about it, you can prune your stories so that it really has the most impact as possible. And if something's not working, as I say, it's usually, if a story's not working, it's usually the structure, like it's usually because something's gone wrong. It's also a very useful way to develop a plot. So if you've only got, why are we beeping? Oops. We've only got, if you've only got one scene or one idea for a story, if you've got all the beats if you've got all the beats written down, if you've got an idea, say that's, I don't know, or a death, like if you've got a major character death, you kind of know that should be either at the beginning as a catalyst, or it should be towards the end as a finale. Or if you've got an idea that you want your story to be about something fluffy like it's two characters going on a dinner date together. The dinner date will probably be Act 2 because that's the idea of the story, and then you can fill in the beats beforehand. You can write in what you would need to get to that point, and then so you've got them asking each other out on a date, which is the catalyst, and then you've got Act 1, which is what we're going to do about it. It's like, oh my god, the date's happening. Oh my god, what are we going to do? What am I going to wear? Act 2 will be the actual date, and then Act 3 and 4 will be dealing with all the consequences of that date. But if you've got just that idea, you can put that in Act 2 and then write out from that, and you kind of know it's a way to get different ideas, because if you know that Act 2 is the date, in Act 3 it's all got to go wrong. So then you can brainstorm 10 different ideas of how that date might go wrong from there, and then pick the best one, or pick the most interesting one. So every story follows it. I can't stress how much every story, particularly TV, follows this structure in one form or another. Sometimes the names for the beats are different, but it will follow it in some form or other. I've got resource sheets, which are the beat sheets written out, 2-page sheet, and just like the beats and an explanation written. And I've also got a 2-page sheet for DS9 fans with The Wire as an example, just explaining how it might work in different situations. So I've got them both on Google Docs, which I guess I'll put on the Discord later if anyone wants to get them. But yeah, that's it. Any questions? No. Hey, Casey.
That was great. Hi.
Hi.
Well done.
I was just kind of gonna ask, like, how has this changed over history? Like, is this
like this obviously isn't new because I know old stories have used it, but like how has it changed over history?
So older stories have a much more, depending on what their purpose is, have a much more repetitive nature. I'm going to stop sharing. Hey, have a much more repetitive, has a much more repetitive nature, and certainly non-Western stories sometimes have a much more cyclical nature. This is a very much a modern thing. It's modern storytelling. From the 18th century onwards, most novels will in some way follow the structure. Not always, because if you think about Wuthering Heights, if you've read that, like she then repeats it twice. she has like the main story with Kathy and Heathcliff, and then she does the whole thing again. And you would not find that in a modern novel. Like, and most film adaptations just kind of, don't bother with that. It's very much gets much more popular when you start getting visual media. So kind of in the 30s, 40s, as you get on, this starts getting used. Why that is, we could go into a lot of things why that is, but some of it is format driven, some of it's commercially driven. As I say, TV very much follows this kind of teaser 4-act structure, sometimes a 3, but 4-act structure tag, because it has to hit the advert breaks and it has to keep the audience's attention. So if your aim is to keep the audience's attention because you're worried about them wandering off, Save the Cat, or in this case the one I've just explained with the lizard, is a very good way of keeping an audience's attention. It means they're not going to get off that journey. Older stories will allow the audience to wander a bit more. So yeah, it depends what you want really, but I would say this has got much more formulaic over time. If you watch any Marvel movie now, it follows the structure because it's written by 17 different people and has had so many rewrites. It has to follow the structure, otherwise no one knows what they're doing. So but it does work. It does work. But
Giuliano asked in chat, what do you think? Can this structure be the reason why some characters' deaths are predictable from the beginning of the episode?
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. And also, sometimes if you're watching and you know about the structure, you can predict the plot of the episode. The most obvious one I can think of is the DS9 episode, The Search, Part 2. If you remember, that's the one where, this is not a spoiler for anybody, I hope, but they're all actually asleep at the end of the episode. They've gone since the Dominion, they've been captured, they go back to the station, everything's changed, but in the end it actually turns out to be asleep. At the point of the episode where the message of the theme happens, Sisko and Bashir are in a space shuttle, and Sisko literally says, "Oh, I thought you were asleep," to Bashir, like 4 minutes in. And if you know that's when the theme is going to be, because the writer's being a bit naughty, if you know that's when the theme and the message of the episode is going to be, you can kind of work out what's going to happen. So yeah, it absolutely is why it's predictable, but that's not always a bad thing. Like, audiences like knowing, it helps them ground themselves. Audiences like knowing a bit about what's going to happen, and if it's following the structure, they feel safe, and then you throw something weird at them. But it makes it quite predictable. Like if you see some, I mean, usually when you're watching something, it moves too fast for you to figure it out. But if you sat there and paused it and thought, okay, what might happen now, then yeah, this would be a good way of predicting stuff.
I mean, I love foreshadowing. You know that thing with that quote about, like, if there's a gun on the mantelpiece.
Yeah, Chekhov's gun.
Gun.
Yeah, just I can't remember the whole quote. Just could you just say the whole quote?
I can't. If there's a gun used in, I can't remember what it is. Act 1, then it will. If it's visible in Act 1, it will come back in Act 3.
Be fired in Act 4 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
if there's a gun hanging on the wall in the beginning of the story, by the end of it, it will go off. Something like that.
Or like it should be. It should go off. Something like
go
that.
Off. Or the audience will expect it to. So when the guy grabs the gun, they will expect it to shoot, and that will raise attention. If you have stuff in the script that never pays off, the audience don't like it.
Yeah.
They're okay with you subverting it. So if you've got I saw a great play once where it was all about a guy trying to commit suicide, and there was a gun in the background, and at the end he shot himself, but it was just like a flag gun. Like, so you can make it comedy. You don't have to actually have it do anything. But if you just ignore it, if you mention it once and never go back to it, they don't like it. Like,
Yeah.
it pisses people off. It's an interesting question as to why it pisses people off, but it's whether that's just an inherent part of the human brain, that they want cause and effect, or whether it's because they've seen so many stories using this structure that they expect it to happen. But yeah, it does make it somewhat predictable.
I mean,
yeah.
people like payoff.
They do, yeah.
I mean, you watch something because it will give you some kind of satisfaction. So this is a part of that satisfaction, you know.
Yeah, and it's also a way to edit your script. So if you have a scene that doesn't follow this beat structure, even if it's lovely, even if it's like your favorite scene, if it doesn't fit into the structure of the script, you have to get rid of it. like, and I know that sounds awful, but like, it's padding. It's a good way. It's if you have something that doesn't follow the beat structure and you can't fit it in, it's like, it's not for this story. Put it aside and write a different story with it. But
does the structure ever work if you take out sections of the beats?
Yes, it does. You don't always have to have a B story. You don't always have to. It's the same in, like, you know, when I said at the beginning, it's like a human life, like birth, childhood, death. Not everybody falls in love. Not everybody gets married. Not everybody gets a job. But you do have to have something like that. If you don't have some of the beats in the right order, and you can swap them about a bit, and it still works. It does still work. But yeah, you don't always have to have it. But it's better if you do. or that's unfair. That's unfair. It gives the audience something to hang on to if you do. Yeah, it doesn't always have to have it, but yeah, it is good. But you can to a degree swap things around, and you can. It's the same thing with everything with writing. There's no hard and fast rules. Like, it's like, it's there to be broken, but it usually,
you have to know what you're doing.
You have to
if
know
you're
what you're doing.
breaking it, yeah.
And usually 95% of the time, when scripts in particular, but it applies to all stories, when scripts don't work, it's because this bit has fallen down or not been thought out.
The movie Knives Out plays with this beat structure in a really interesting way. I don't know if you've seen this one.
No.
Well, I'm not gonna mess about with it too much, but you sort of it feels like when you're watching it that the act, sort of act 4, act 3 or act 4 is coming way too early, and then it sort of, without doing weird timeline stuff, like, it's actually the second act instead of the third act, but it has the right structure to be later in the film, and it's just very strange to watch. But then as you get through the film, it like resolves itself.
Yeah,
but you're right. You're as someone who's watching the film, you're like, this is not right. Yeah. Something is wrong.
You can mess with, like, Arrival does it quite well with the Alien movie, where it's all jumping in time.
Mm-hmm.
You can subvert it, but you have to get it. You have to know what you're doing first. You have to know this first, because this is what the audience will be like. You know, it's in the same way that a human life. You know, you can get married when you're a teenager, and that's cool. That's fine. That's great. But it's, people go, oh, that's not right. You know, so that's a deviation from what I'm expecting. But sometimes that's cool. Like, not getting married in the human thing is like, that's great, that's interesting. There's another, what else have you done instead? But there are, in the same with the story, there are things that the audience is expecting, whether that's because it's programmed to their head or not, or whether it's because they've seen so much of it, or whether it's fulfilling some kind of human journey need. I don't know, but yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
That's awesome.
No, but I'm just going to say this was great. Thank you.
That's all right. I like structure.
It was very lovely. You did a very good job presenting it. I swear on my scriptures that I'll watch The Wire tonight. I've got it up on my Netflix. Do not tell Sid. Promise me.
You're not seeing it. I can't see it. But if you watch Deep Space Nine, like I cannot. They are so fixed to the structure. Like it's unbelievable. Like
Holy gospel.
the most obvious one is also like in The Pale Moonlight. If you think about the opening image and the closing image, it's literally Sisko sitting in the same place both times, but having a shift, which is that he's processed what he did now. Whereas the beginning image was, I can't process what I've done. The closing image is, okay, I can't quite process it, but I'll learn to live with it. And it's literally the same shot. And the directors know this. The directors know the beat sheet too and are following that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I love structure. I could quite, if I didn't have to write any fic ever and I could just structure it out and you'd all be happy with that, I would do it. I don't, none of this writing. I don't want to do any of that. But it's
just hit the beats. Just
yeah.
just start publishing fics that are just bulleted Act 1.
I do have a question actually. Should one apply these beats to fanfic writing?
Well, that's entirely up to you. I would say it's an interesting one. I would say yes. I think it would be helpful and it would help you write quicker. But fanfic is a whole thing of its own. A lot of fanfic writers do this anyway without knowing that they are, because they're so used to how a story is being told to them. Yes, Irina?
No, I'm like, I do it without knowing, because now when I've been going through the beats and everything, I haven't had them like spelled out so neatly before. I knew about the general structure of literature, in literature, but not specific beats as thoroughly as you presented them. And I'm like, I have that in my story, and I have that, and I have that, and I have a lot of foreshadowing that pays off in the end, because it's introduced early on, and then increasingly repeated foreshadowing through the whole thing to lead people. The observant ones will have caught it the first time and been intrigued, and then slowly gotten even more like Lego blocks to build that picture. But the non-observant people just like even be, in the end, oh, this was actually there, but I didn't catch it. So yeah.
As I say, most writers, partly because they're viewers and readers before they're writers.
Yeah.
It's like sentence structure. You learn to babble and you learn it just by seeing and hearing other people do it. The most writers, even when they start, have some kind of sense of it. And that feeling when you're writing sometimes you just know the rhythm. Some of it, I think, is that it's the pacing, the rhythm. I would say, Heather, to go back to your question, I would say I would never tell other fic writers they should be doing it one way or another, but I would say it would be helpful. I've seen fic writers who aren't doing it and it's a mess.
What about the concept of chiasmus? I don't know if you've heard about it. It's like using the same point at the beginning and the end.
Yes.
Does that make a good, effective episode?
It can do. It kind of, if you're trying to plot something, it does kind of leave you the question of what do I do with the 10,000 words in between. So this is just an easy. If you've got the beginning and the end, and then you're sat there going, oh shit, I've got to write 7 chapters in between this. The beat structure gives you an idea. It gives you a surefire way you're not going to screw up, and it gives you something to. It's like you're rock climbing, and you can see the top when you're at the bottom. The beat structure just gives you points to hold on to on the way up. You don't have to use it. You can go and free fall all you want, but this helps you. Like, it does help. It helps you if you're sat there going, I have literally no idea how to get to the top of this mountain. I know what the top of the mountain looks like, but I've got no idea. So I would say, and I wouldn't make the distinction between fic writers and writers. I don't think there is one, but like, I would say yes, use it, but it's entirely up to you. Like, it's, if you can get on fine without it, fine. but your reader will be expecting this. And even if you don't want to follow it, know that your reader will be expecting it and know that you're subverting that expectation.
I would also say that fanfic is like a really good place to practice it.
Also, because fanfic writers are very discerning and will switch off quicker than most people if they're not happy. so like because they can just go read something else and it's all there. You know, if they don't like that Garrick and Bashir story, they've got 10 others on the same page they can click. So like this beat structure helps keep the attention. So it's like they're not if you don't start the story where it should be and get to the catalyst quickly, they're not going to read this. You know, they're not going to stay through the 3 chapters. Some of them might, some of them won't. But if you want to get them to stick around, it's a good way to do it.
Everybody unmute and applaud.
Good job, Emma.
I really like it. It's my favorite thing. It's also neat. It's like clockwork. Gorgeous.
Hey, you're such an expert. I should have you beta read all my fics so you can help me become a better writer.
Well, if you have the beat sheet, like you can do it much better than anybody else can. Like it's your story. Edit it with the beat sheet. Like it's like
Okay.
it will do it for you. It's like it's much
All
fun.
right.
Do you think that you could share the beat sheet that you have in the Discord?
Yes, I will. I'll put both. They're both Google Docs that I've made shared documents. So one
Cool.
of them is beat structure, and then the other one is the beat structure, but with the wire as an example. So yeah, I'll just
The murder lizard.
Fantastic.
go ahead and edit. Cool.
It's an excellent example of all of the good examples in Deep Space Nine, because it does those commercial breaks. They line up real well. But that's a really great.
Yeah, you can have your lizard romance, but you have to break for the Weetabix advert. Like at a certain point, like lizard romance is tolerated, but only for you know. You have to get that. There's TVs to sell. There's TVs to sell. You have to do these.
We're gonna change gears a little bit, and I do have a baby in my lap, so everybody say hi. But yeah, so I'm gonna get started here. Let's see if I can share my screen. Aha!
Aha.
There we go.
I like it already.
It's all of us. So a lot of these you can do sitting down, and most of them are pretty low impact and pretty easy to do, but the first one I am going to talk about is there's something called your posterior chain, which is basically the muscles and something called the fascia, which is the connective tissue that goes from the back of the top of your head down to the back of your feet, down to your feet. So it kind of is all connected. It's one of the reasons why if you're having, say someone was in a car accident or has really, really, really bad back pain, something like that, if they try to bring their chin to their chest, depending on how tight your posterior chain is, you're going to feel that all the way down. Some people feel it in their neck, some people feel it between their shoulder blades, some people feel it all the way down into their back, into their low back. So it's your calves, it's your hamstrings, it's your gluteus maximi and minimi, and the latissimus dorsi, which is over here. Can you see my pointer?
Yeah.
So these are your latissimus dorsi. They're your lats. And then your erector spinae, which is just a very complicated term for all of the tiny little muscles that hold your spine together. And honestly, the best way to stretch your posterior chain is to just roll your head down and try and touch your toes. So standing up, just doing a toe touch, or when you're sitting down, trying to reach forward and touch your toes, that's going to stretch that whole posterior chain, which is pretty cool. Basically, if you just do that.
I've never in my life been able to do that. Ever.
Well, I don't think many people can do quite what she's doing. But as close as you can get,
Yeah.
that is going to stretch that whole, sort of from the back of her head all the way down and around, down to the bottoms of her feet. Everything's getting stretched. Now, that's the back. The problem with sitting and being a laptop goblin is that everything is crunched forward and in. So the big one for the lower body is your quadriceps and your hip flexors, which are essentially the things that get very short when you sit for a long time. I like how I'm pointing at it with my finger, like you guys can see. You can see here that in the figure, she is stretching, sort of just bending her knee and bringing it up. The important thing to remember when you're trying this stretch is not to let your knee flail out. It's to try and keep your knees as close together as possible. Because when your knee flails out, sort of instead of going straight like that, it kind of goes out like that. You're not stretching your quadricep muscles. You're stretching your adductor muscles, which are like on the inside here. And they actually attach way higher in your leg. So it's going to give you the illusion of a better stretch when you're not actually stretching the big muscle groups as much as you should be. Because your quads go all the way from up here, all the way down, and actually attach below the knee. They're big. But the adductor muscles start about mid-thigh and continue up and attach sort of right on the pelvis there. So, you can also stretch it's also stretching your iliopsoas. Now, yeah, it's a weird word, and they are muscles on the inside of your pelvis. But you know that feeling you get when you've been sitting for a really long time and you stand up and you kind of go, ugh, as in the last couple of inches when you're sort of straightening up and your hips kind of don't want to straighten out and you have to make that weird noise. Old people make it a lot, like all the time. Like it's the oh sound that people make when they stand up. That's because these muscles, this in particular, the psoas muscle, contracts when we sit down. So it attaches to the inside of our lumbar vertebrae right here. And that's something called the origin. And this is the insertion. This is where it attaches. And it attaches to the inside of our leg. Well, when you stand up, the distance between point A and point B is a little bit longer than when you sit. When you sit, this hinges and the distance between point A and point B is a little bit smaller. Muscles love to be short. It's their favorite way to be. They're very happy to be all curled up. It's why babies love the fetal position. But that means that when you stand up or want to stretch, you get a little bit of pushback from your muscles. So the that quadricep stretch actually stretches these quite a bit. And I hit a thing and it went to the next slide. There we go. And you can actually, since they're desk stretches, if you are at a desk and stand up, you can put your knee on your chair and put your hand on your desk and just use your chair to stretch the front of your hips. It's very exciting and very easy and a good way to not fall down when you're doing the stretch. So now the actual like stretches you can do at your desk. One of my favorite exercises and things to tell people to do is to put your hands like this behind your head, almost like you're doing like a crunch position. And that is going to actually tense up. This is our trapezius. A lot of people think that our trapezius is just this top part right here. It's actually this whole big sheet of muscle. And gosh, I wish I could get this to stop turning, but I can't. So what we want to do is put your hands behind your head and reach back with your elbows. You only want to hold that for like 3 to 5 seconds and then relax. And then do it again. Do it I like to say 3 to 5 times for 3 to 5 seconds every time you think about it. What you're doing is exercising and shush, no. You're exercising and increasing blood flow to these muscles in between your shoulder blades. It's your trapezius and your rhomboids. A lot of times those muscles are actually overstretched, which is where we get a lot of shoulder pain. They're coming from the stretched muscles. They're not coming from the contracted muscles. And these muscles in the front, you can't, it's been sort of cut away because you have to be able to see underneath it. But this is pectoralis major, and then this is pec minor. These are the big muscles in the front of your chest. There are pulling muscles. They are what we use to lift a lot, and they are what gets contracted when we spend all day hunched over our keyboard doing various different things. So when we reach back with our elbows here, we're contracting these muscles in the back, bringing our shoulder blades together, strengthening these muscles, and stretching these muscles, pec minor, pec major. And when we do that, we actually can counteract something called it's just a forward shoulder roll, because the only place, fun fact, the only place that your arm and your shoulder blade is attached to the rest of your skeleton is right here, to the collarbone, right at the collarbone, basically. Everything else is muscle anchors. It's why we have cool monkey arms that can go all sorts of different directions. But it also means that if these muscles in the front get super contracted, they're going to pull your shoulder forward, and your scapula is just going to come forward. Come forward, and your whole shoulder can roll and can compress nerves and things like that. So that's why you can sometimes get like tingling in your fingers, or your hand can hurt, or your fingers can fall asleep, or your arm can fall asleep if you've been sitting at a desk for a really long time. It's because your shoulder is just kind of rolled forward, and there's just not as much room for those nerves to get blood flow. This is also another good one. You can do it sitting down. You just reach all the way up. Hello, Morgan. You just reach all the way up, And go to the side. Big, big, big good one for basically your entire upper arm, your shoulders, something called teres major, your lats again, and your obliques. It's also a really great one for something called your serratus muscles, which are on the inside here and not really shown. But they help a lot with breathing, as well as pec minor, which is the little one, this little one right here, helps with breathing. So it helps lift up the rib cage when you take a deep breath in, and more oxygen's always good. So it's good for sleep, it's good for our bodies, it's good for our brains, it's good to help counteract anxiety and things like that. So, you know. There's another one with working our way down. We've got some forearm stretches. Those are pretty obvious. You can sort of take a hold of your fingers and pull your wrist down and up, side to side. My favorite thing to do with this, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for this. Stop share. Maybe it's the big red button that says stop share. So one of my favorite stretches for wrists and forearms is actually something called a pin and stretch, and there's no good way to show it in a static image. So essentially what you want to do is contract whatever muscle it is that you're wanting to stretch. It's really great for wrists. So you're going to contract this way and put your thumb or your fingers or something right here and sort of pull down a little bit. So there's a little bit of a stretch. So you're sort of pulling against that muscle. There's almost some resistance when you bring it back. You can do it 3 times. You're going to want to do it over here, right in the middle, and then off to the side, other side here. So sort of the middle, and then off to the side here. Sounds crazy, but you'll, depending on how tight your wrist is, you'll probably get feel some stuff moving. You can also do it in the back. You flex, do the same thing. Pull your hand forward, flex the middle right here. Pull your hand forward. And that you'll probably feel in the backs of your fingers. There we go. And that is actually a really good way to help prevent carpal tunnel in a lot of ways. Because, let's see here. So carpal tunnel syndrome, a lot of people are just like, I have carpal tunnel, or doctors will be like, you have carpal tunnel because your forearms hurt or your wrist hurts. Carpal tunnel is, these are your carpal bones right here in your wrist. We have 10 of them. Yes. No, we have 8 of them. It's been a long time. But in the middle of our carpal bones, there's basically just a tunnel, a flattened oval spot that all of the tendons that control our fingers and all of the nerves and most of the blood vessels that supply our fingers and hands with blood and feeling go through. Now, the problem that happens with carpal tunnel syndrome is something gets irritated. A muscle, a tendon, a nerve, the fascia on the inside of the space, something. When something gets irritated in our body, it gets inflamed, which means it swells a little bit, what happens to something that swells when there's no space to swell? It pushes up against everything else. And that's where the pain comes from, because whatever it is that's irritated is essentially pushing up against everything else, which is compressing nerves and causing pain. One of the ways that you can fix that, if you are having pain and you're having carpal tunnel pain anyway, ice is actually a really good solution. But one of the ways to actively prevent that from happening is stretching out your wrists on the regular, especially if you do a lot of static or repetitive movement like typing or data entry, or if you work at like an Amazon shipment fulfillment center, which I used to work at a doctor's office right next to an Amazon fulfillment center. So the wrist and shoulder repetitive injuries we got, good gracious, never worked for Amazon. Anyway, then, so those are the big ones for the wrists. Since you're a laptop goblin like me, those are the wrists are big ones. The other one is your neck and shoulders. We already did something called the shoulder girdle, which is like the thing that holds your shoulder together. That's not your rotator cuff. This is more your neck area. This right here is something called your sternocleidomastoid. It's a really long word. You can just say SCM. It attaches to that bump right behind your ear. Feel your right behind that sort of bony protuberance thing. It attaches right there, comes all the way down, and attaches right here on your collarbone, right next to something called a jugular notch right here. So it is the muscle that turns our head. One of the muscles that turns our head. It's also the turtle muscle. It's the one that makes you go like this. And it's the one that a lot of people with forward head posture, say from like working on a phone all the time, or looking at a phone all the time, it's the one that sort of tips that head forward and down, and it's gotten contracted over time. Then there's your trapezius, which is just sort of the upper trapezius. It's the part that you can grab. It's since we just talked about the wire, it's where the ridges would be if we were a Cardassian. Is it's right over the trapezius muscle. One of the easiest ways to stretch that, honestly, is to just tip your ear to your shoulder, and then the arm that your head is tipped away from, reach down towards the ground with it. And that is going to stretch your trapezius quite a bit. And it's also going to bring your shoulders down, which if you're crunched up on a laptop, your shoulders are going to slowly but surely try and make friends with your ears, generally. To stretch your SCM, this one of the best stretches is to turn and look over your shoulder and then tip your head back, almost like you're trying to face your ear towards the ceiling. And you're going to feel that. A lot of people feel it underneath their jaw, which is even more muscles that are very exciting. They're very excited to get stretched. But it's a really great one for that SCM muscle. And if you want to stretch it even more, you can put your fingers sort of on your collarbone. And so when you turn and you put your fingers on your collarbone, sort of press down a little bit, much like when you were doing the pin and stretch with your wrist and tip your head back like a scandalized Southern woman. Just, my Lord. Or I guess for the Brits, a scandalized Victorian woman. I don't. Oh, got the vapors. And again, you're going to feel that underneath your jaw. A lot of places people are going to feel underneath their jaw and sort of in the front of our neck. It's weird because we stretch forward a lot, but we don't stretch back a whole lot. But there's almost as many muscles in the front of our neck as there are in the back. So, and since we're constantly looking sort of forward and down, they're the ones that are going to get slowly contracted and a little bit tighter. Hi. There's also something called PNF stretching, which again, there's not really a good static way to show it, which is a way to sort of trick your nervous system into making your muscles a little bit longer than they actually are, a little bit longer than their resting length. So you can do this with any muscle, but I'll show you with our neck. So something you can do, you're gonna bring your ear to your shoulder, and it's a little bit of a stretch, but not too much. With your hand on your head, gently resist, and you're going to try and bring your head up, almost like you're trying to bring your head back up to center. But you're not gonna do it hard. You just want to put a little bit of tension into that muscle. Hold it for a couple of seconds, and then relax and stretch it even further. And you can do it on the other, and then you can sort of do it on the other side and sort of see how far you go. So, or how much more range of motion you get. So bring your ear to your shoulder and then try and lift up a little bit. Hi. Yeah, I know I'm doing weird things, huh? And then relax and try and stretch it even further. And you get more range of motion. Hi, yeah. On either side. You can do that for your sternocleidomastoid as well by looking over your shoulder, putting your hand to your jaw, and sort of trying to look forward, but not allowing yourself to. You only want to use like 15% strength though. You don't want to hurt yourself. And relax, and then try and look even further over your shoulder, and you'll find that you get even more rotation. You can do it like 2 or 3 times on each side, but you generally don't get too much extra rotation or more muscle release after like the 2nd or 3rd time. You can do it with pretty much any muscle in your body too. It's pretty exciting. You're essentially reprogramming the receptors in the tendons to a new resting length for your muscles, because the back part of our brain that has this 3-dimensional model of how our body should be when we're not thinking about it has all of these muscle lengths just like a computer, just in, it's all pre-programmed in. And if you do some active stretching like this, proprioceptive nerve function stretching, PNF, it's also called muscle energy stretching, which is, it's the difference between talking to a doctor about it and talking to like a massage therapist about it. It's like PNF stretching, muscle energy stretching. It's the same thing. But yeah, it's essentially resetting that muscle length in your autonomic nervous system, so that every time you do it, you're gonna get a little bit more relaxed and a little bit longer sort of default muscle length, and eventually you can not have any bad posture, or theoretically you can you can fix posture, and you can fix a lot of upper back pain, and a lot of headaches as well can be helped with neck and shoulder exercises and posture and things like that. I won't say they'll fix everything, because there's a lot of reasons people get headaches, but it can definitely help. So I know that wasn't the most coherent, because I'm used to actually being able to like physically move people while I talk about this stuff. But does anyone have any questions?
Yes, actually, and you might tell me to go see a doctor after I ask it. But when I was doing the stretches, the right was all right, but the left was like making me lightheaded and dizzy. Why is that?
I mean, there's imbalances. Everybody has some imbalance somewhere. Some people have more than others, especially if you're right-handed. Depending on your everyday activity. So I'm right-handed. Depending on my everyday activity, if I do a lot of like computer work and things like that, my right side is going to be a lot more tense than my left, just because I am right-handed. So I'm doing a lot of fine motor skill stuff. But if I'm doing something like, if I'm carrying for Morrigan all day or something, and I'm holding him all day, the left side of my body is going to be super tense, because I'm doing a lot of static contraction on the left side, while my right is free to do all the fine motor skill stuff. So if I was, say, moving boxes for a living or delivering packages or something, then my non-dominant side would probably be a lot more tense, which is a really long way of saying everybody has a little bit of a different reaction or a different amount of mobility on the left and the right side. And it's possible that it's just that's just what it is. One side's just a little bit more tense than the other. Don't push it. Don't feel like you have to have as much mobility on one side as the other. You want to be able to feel a stretch, but you don't want to be in pain. You don't want to hurt yourself, or anytime you're stretching, if you reach a point where if someone else was doing it to you, you would say, stop, don't do it to yourself.
Okay.
So, but yeah, and also if you're overstretching and you get lightheaded for any reason, stop. Shooting pains or like an electric sensation, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you are probably putting pressure on a nerve, so you'll want to relax. And if you want to continue the stretch, you can go back to it, just ease into it. But that's sort of that electric feeling or any kind of burning feeling is, again, you're probably putting pressure on a nerve. So we have a lot of them. It happens quite a bit. But I hope that answered your question.
Lily says in the chat, I have a question. Do you think it's better to do a long stretch and hold it for as long as you can, or better to do lots of short stretches?
Longer stretches. So a series of short stretches is fine as long as you're not bouncing. You don't want to bounce, because that's a really good way to tear muscle tissue. Not in a big way, but micro tears are still not great. Oh no, you're fine. You're all good. 3-year-olds and make lots of noise. This one's making lots of noise too. I'm surprised he's being as quiet as he is, actually. I jinxed it. Longer stretches are actually a little bit better if you're trying to retrain muscle length, because the longer you hold a stretch, you have different types of stretch receptors in your muscles. And there are quick responding receptors and long responding receptors. If you hold a stretch for 30 seconds or longer, you are going to be getting into those longer stretch receptors. And if you can hold those and get those receptors used to a longer muscle length, you're going to have an easier time maintaining flexibility. So a less deep stretch held for longer is generally more beneficial for flexibility than a series of short stretches, even if you do them over and over and over again. Does that make sense? Okay. Awesome.
Katie, I was wondering what you thought of, so here, posture correctors have come in since the lockdown and people working at desks as a way of, I think, doing what you're saying with stretching the muscles. What would your opinion be on them? Should we have them or should we not have them?
So what, posture correctors?
Yes, we have one.
Are those the ones that sort of pull your shoulders back?
Yeah, you're meant to work in them if you aren't working at a work desk. Yeah, so it kind of fits like that, and then you do it like that, and then.
So that's actually a really great tool, as long as you're not as long as people aren't sort of relaxing into them and letting it do all the work that your muscles are supposed to do.
Right.
Something that happens a lot with people who do manual labor for a living, they'll wear the lower back brace all the time. And once they get used to it, if you've let those muscles atrophy a little bit because they let the back brace do all the work for them when they're wearing it. If you wear the posture corrector and treat it as something that is sort of a reminder, like you find yourself sort of slumping forward and the posture corrector, you notice it and you go, oh, and you sort of bring those shoulders back. Or you do the hands behind the head and do that. That's going to build up the muscles that you need to have that correct posture and keep your shoulders back. And then you'll just walk around like that. It's one of the reasons why ballerinas have such great posture. It's because their shoulders are always down and back. Yeah, I know. And so, yeah, as long as you use the posture corrector as like a tool instead of letting it turn into a crutch, then it's actually a great thing to use. So.
Oh yeah, thank you. I was wondering because they've come in a lot here since people started working not at work desks.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's like, okay, I'll ask you here. Cool. That's really helpful. Like, it's really interesting as well, the talk.
Oh, for sure. I know. It's late for a baby. Anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns? General weirdness about muscles? Strange inquiries?
I probably should visit a chiropractor, but
I just wanted to say this was useful because since I'm into acting and we've had dancing lessons and things like that, I use some of these stretches. Like I've been trying to do them every morning. I didn't do them today and I'm paying the price. Yes, I'm trying to do them in the mornings, but some of these I didn't know about, so I will use them.
Awesome. I do know one body mechanics and sort of mobility thing that's pretty that gets taught in a lot of acting schools is something called the Alexander technique, which is where you essentially train your body to a neutral position, sort of as I don't know. You probably heard about it in a class.
I heard about it. We didn't really learn about it, but I heard that it's a thing.
It's a good.
Gets you as neutral as possible.
Yeah, you sort of
like the way you walk and the way you move and.
Exactly. You sort of try to align everything as correctly as possible. And then from there, you have sort of a blank template to do whatever you need to do for a particular character, this, that, or the other thing. It's also a really healthy place to start from because you know how to come back from any physicality you've given a character so you don't end up like giving your character a limp and then limping around for a week and a half while you're in shows, and developing imbalances that way. So it's a fun little body mechanics rabbit hole for performance people. It's exciting.
Very useful. I should get more into that because I've realized as time goes on that I'm really good at emotion. I'm really good at getting into that. I'm really good at, the psychological side of things. But like my body has been woefully neglected for way too long. So that's kind of my weak spot. I need to train up a bit.
Well, awesome.
So yeah.
Right. Anybody else? Any questions? No?
I mean, should we be working if we're working hunched over a laptop all the whole time? I take it that's not good. I take it we should not be doing
It's
this.
not great. If you're ideally you have a screen at eye level and a keyboard in a place where you can keep your shoulders relaxed and your elbows sort of in a neutral position. But that is ideal. That doesn't really happen even for people in office settings. So it's we do what we can with what we have. But it's a good thing to just sort of take a break, like every 30 minutes or so. They say 20 minutes, but if I took a break from doing something productive every 20 minutes, I would never get anything done because it takes I think everyone takes a little bit of time to get into the task that they're doing. And then if you're
to get into the zone.
Yeah.
If I start writing, sometimes it's just like 2 hours or 3 hours.
Yeah,
I'm
like, I was just gonna say, gone? Yeah, like I'm lucky if I move at all in 2 hours while I'm writing.
Exactly. So just whenever you think about it, like just kind of trying to open up your posture from that forward and down, and just sort of trying to open that up and look up and move around whenever you think about it is the best first step. But anything else? No? Well,
that was great, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you all. It's been lovely.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you. This is great.
Bye, Katie. Bye.